We had, we have a bunch of 75-year-old trees right now. So the trees 50 years ago were 45 years old, and they weren't as big as they are right now. But a lot of them have been removed as the houses have gone in.
Is that particularly focused in South Seattle or North Seattle?
I think they probably used aerial photos, which were less high resolution than they are today. They're probably photographic. So there's this science of using aerial images. It's called photogrammetry, and photogrammetry is kind of a archaic GIS technique. Nowadays, it's all done by sampling and by examining the frequency of the laser cameras that they're using.
Machine learning, yeah, and
So there was
spectral imagery, higher spectral and spatial imagery.
there was one issue with the calibration of the LiDAR radar, and it was set at 8 feet above the ground, apparently, and that would include a lot of shrubs. And at the time, the canopy was thought to be 23%, then it jumped to 28%, and so we kept asking, and we've never actually gotten an answer. Is that because you included shrubs that are 8 feet tall in your tree analysis, your canopy analysis? So really that 28% canopy cover figure that we have, that we're using as our working number, is highly suspect, because it seems like they would have answered us, why are you including shrubs in your tree analysis?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, we've asked, they don't give us answers.
Well, so for the flyer,
The flyer,
I took off the 40%, the census value.
where did you have that located on here?
I had it on the bar graph. Basically this section said Seattle's tree canopy dropped 12% since 1970. That was kind of a contested detail. I removed that.
So you put in 8 years.
Yes, I pulled that data specifically from City of Seattle report, and it seems to be something they want to stand behind, so I thought I'd use that.
When the auditor was doing his report in 2009, I sent a message in why don't you do a survey of commercial tree service providers? Ask them how many trees they're cutting down. If we had asked that question in 2009 and asked it at other times, I think we would have gotten some good numbers. Excuse me. The 2007 Urban Forest Management Plan says that you have to have an inventory as a baseline to make good decisions. And the scientific method includes surveying what you have before you start modifying it, before you start letting years go by and having other trees be cut down. And we just don't do that because our city is too cheap to take a tree inventory, in spite of the fact that our 2007 management says that we need to have a tree inventory.
Would you say that IC3, the mobile app, if it took off and a community adopted it as something that they'd like to use, that could help fill that gap?
Yes, and it is filling the gap, because we have several citizen science initiatives, like the last 6,000. There's the Audubon's, Seattle Audubon's Canopy Connections, and there's a history of people wanting to go out there and know what we have. We don't know how many trees we have. We think that trees might grow 1.5% larger per year in canopy volume.
Is that both a statistic for broadleaf and conifer?
Yeah. So like, for example, when when we had an injunction against a school district at Ingram High School back in the mid-2000s, we saw a lot of deception. They said that the madrone trees that they were going to be cutting down are 40 feet tall. They were 90 feet tall. They said that the fir trees they were cutting down were 75 feet tall. They were 118 feet tall. And this is a public agency. The school district isn't supposed to be lying to the people. And if they don't know and they make empirical statements, that's irresponsible. And that was how we got that injunction to stick for a year and a half until they modified their plan, and they ended up only cutting down about half as many trees.
So Michael, can you maybe tell me why, particularly in this area, in the South Park, Duwamish area, that there's so few conifer trees? Is it mostly a relic of the industrial development that happened out here, or is it something that's being continued to be managed to look this way and they're avoiding planting conifers, or is it something about people just don't like needles on their lawns, sort of?
We have a monoculture. We got a monoculture of big leaf maples around here, and the big leaf maple trees are opportunistic specimens. They are excellent at staking out available sunlight and suppressing the growth of other plants underneath them. That's why the Doug fir trees don't get very big, because they don't grow well in shade. And the big leaf maple trees have roots that are well adapted to very steep slopes, which is what we have in Seattle. Seattle is mostly steep hillsides. There's quite a few valleys and plains where a lot of the houses are located. Can't cram as many houses in there, so the hillsides haven't been intensively developed. Up until now they're starting to put houses everywhere, cramming them in. And even on the Seattle City Light substation land that was declared surplus, the city decided to treat those surplus lands as cash income. Very similar to the way the school district decided to treat their closed schools as income, and they would balance a 1 or 2 year budget cycle with the money from the proceeds of the sale of the real estate. But then what are the citizens supposed to do now when we need more schools? We've sold many of our school buildings. We've sold a lot of our land. So it's really a bad deal to balance your budget based on real estate sales of surplus property. And so that's where the Seattle Green Spaces Coalition came in. They held meetings. We had over 200 people at a public meeting in the Arrowhead Community Gardens, which is a Seattle Housing Authority property, over at Myers Parcels. Myers Parcels is 28 acres of vacant city land, and it was zoned industrial. And when they decided to expand the fire station that's at Myers Parcels, they unfortunately had to reroute the creek. And because the creek went through a wetland, there was a multi-year investigation by the Department of Ecology, and the city claims that they weren't fined, but actually they had to do an incredible amount of remedial work to fix the creek after they built that fire station there. So in a sense they were fined, but they just get really defensive and insist that they weren't fined. Well, thou doth protesteth too much.
So I'm looking for maybe a statement as to why